Hi, in this video we're going to just take you on to the second step of the Get Started series. There's 6 videos in this series, in the MRDC Fundamentals series, that should help you learn the basics of the MRDCL scripting language. Alright, so you should have watched Get Started 1 to understand some of the things that we've talked about with stages in MRDCL, the start control, finish control, and how we specify 2 very basic variables, Q1 and Q2. We're now going to go on to something a bit more advanced, but looking at integers and numbers that you might want to pick up, and picking up variables from other variables, and I'll explain that as we go along. The files for this video you'll find in the folder int03. So let's look at the data now in fields 9 and 10 of our data. So if we move along to the 9th and 10th field, we get these 2 fields here, and you can see there's an 02 for the first respondent, an 05 for the second respondent, and 00 for the third respondent. And that question is going to ask, in that 2-digit field there, how many children they have. So this person will have 2 children, 5 for the next, and none for the one after. So let's have a look at that now. And you can see here that what we're picking up is we're picking up an integer this time. So we define integer. Now this is just my good practice, or I think it's a good practice. I just define my integers with an I on the front so that they stand out from ordinary questions which have responses like single or multiple response questions. But you could call it Q3. There's no reason why you have to call it IQ3. So I've called this integer IQ3, and I've defined it as coming from dollar meaning field or column 9 to 10. Now do be careful, if you miss that dollar off, it will just say equals 9 minus 10, and 9 minus 10 is minus 1, and it will hold the answer as minus 1. So don't miss that dollar off, otherwise you'll get the right answer, because it will do arithmetic of 9 minus 10. So this tells it to pick up IQ3, the number of children, from the 9th and 10th field. There's no text associated with that, so I can literally just pick up the title, and in the same form as we did before by saying XE equals, quote, Q3 number of children in family, and close that out with, quote, comma. So that's all we need to do there from integer, is just to define it. Now I'm going to move down to here, and I'm going to put that into ranges. Now you could, if you wanted to, just pick up the ranges for the number of children directly from the data columns, just like that, and it would work fine. I prefer not to do that. I prefer to have a rule where you only pick up each piece of data once. And the reason for that is, if you've got a big script and you move this piece of code further down the script for some reason, and you'd edited the data or edited IQ3 in between, it wouldn't reflect in the variable further down, and you might not be able to find what you've done with that data. So I'm going to pick up my variable called Q3 as coming from IQ3. So that's the variable we just defined just a few rows up. And I'm picking up people who said 0, no children, 1 to 2 children, so that's 1 or 2 children effectively, 3 children, and greater than 3 children. And you can see, as I did in the previous Get Started script, I've got E on the end, so that anybody who doesn't answer that goes into that catch-all category, so that they go into one of the responses there. So anybody who didn't answer that question would be picked up as an error bit or not stated. So that's put my answers into those ranges, grouping them as 0, 1 to 2, 3 or greater than 3, and the text, just like before for a single response variable, are just the same, with no children, semicolon, delimiting each one, and the title follows. So it's exactly the same really as we've done previously. Now one thing I want to draw your attention to here is this line of code, which was before the definition of IQ3. Now this is a format option, and there are about 200 or so format options that are in MRDCL. Most of them apply to tables, so most of them control perhaps things like what statistical options you produce, how many decimal places you show for percentages, all sorts of things that you want on your tables with varying settings. This is one of a small number of format options that applies to data that you're picking up. And what this does, this format option here says IFBU, and what that means is that all format options are formed of a base of 3 characters, so IFB is going to tell it what to do with integer fields that are blank. So IFB means I want to treat integer fields that are blank in some particular way. And you have a choice how you treat integer fields that are blank. You can either treat them as 0 or you can treat them as U. Now U means undefined, and undefined is a special value that MRDC has, which is rather like a null that you might have seen in an Excel spreadsheet, or just a value that's not allowed. So if I want to not treat blank children on my data as 0, I need to set IFB to U, because by default MRDCL will treat blank in an integer field as 0. So anybody who didn't answer how many children they had would get treated as none. So here I'm setting IFB to U, and that will mean it gets treated as undefined and not the same as 0. Now there are occasions where you do want to treat a blank as 0. Imagine you've got a long list of different things. Let's say you're asking people 20 things on how they might spend their income. It's very likely they wouldn't put 0, 0, and 0 for all the things that they didn't spend any income on, and they might leave them blank. So in that particular case, blank might quite legitimately mean 0, and you would probably use IFB 0 for that. Now what this format option means is that it will get applied to every integer or every numeric field from now on. If we wanted to set it back to IFB 0 afterwards, that's perfectly legitimate. We could at this stage here, for example, now say that any integers defined after this are to treat blank as 0. As it happens, there are no other integers in this script, so it wouldn't actually have any effect. But that just illustrates that you can set it back and forth as much as you wish to. Alright, so that's the end of the data stage, and that's all we've got additional in this particular script, the handling of integers. What we've also got in this script though is how to start to manage tables. And we're seeing some other types of commands that you might have in your table stage. Now this particular type of setting here, %JH, that's called a special label. Anything with a percentage is a special label, and that's going to tell MRDCL how to put the job header out. Now by default the job header is blank, so %JH followed by this text here is going to set my job header that's going to appear at the top of every table. And it appears in single quotes just like any other text that we've seen before, like a title, it's the same thing. You'll see in here though, it's got something in square brackets as we call it, or less than, greater than, but it's got JC, and that's called a label control, and that label control is going to tell MRDCL that the text my project has got to be centered. If I put JL, it would left justify it. If I put JR, it would right justify it. But it looks best, I think, normally on tables to have it centered. So we've got less than JC, greater than, and the text, my project, will get centered. So things you find inside less than, greater than symbols will be label controls that will do something to a label. And this is one of many that we'll encounter as the sessions continue. The next thing that we've got now is a global BT hash. Now a global BT hash says that I want to set the base title for every table to be all respondents. So what that's going to do at the top of every table, underneath the table title, it will put out a base title of all respondents on every table. The exception to this is where I set it for a particular table. So if I apply a base to a table where I only want to perhaps pick people who are under 45 for a particular table, for that table I'm going to re-specify the base as all respondents under 45. But by default, the global base title will be all respondents, so that will just come out automatically for me. My next line in the table stage illustrates how you can use different types of format options. Now, as I've already mentioned, format options are made up of 3 characters. So we've got some here. We've got SDV, SPL, UCH and CAS. But there's 3 types of format options. There's format options that are called logical format options, and what they are is either true or false. In other words, they're either turned on or they're turned off. You have format options that take a value. So this one here takes a value, and we've set SPL to 180. We'll explain what that is in a second. And then there's format options, a few of them anyway, that take a value. So CAS is saying I want to set the character for 0 to be a 0 itself rather than a dash. Now, all of these format options have defaults. So the logical ones will have a default, meaning they're set to true or false. The numeric ones will be set to a particular value, and the character ones will also be set to a particular character. So what this is doing, it's saying I want a standard deviation on every table, but it's sensible enough, MRDCL, to realise that you only want a standard deviation on a table where there's some scoring or there's a numeric involved. So it's only going to apply that when there's a mean score or some other scoring system in place for a calculation and a standard deviation to be calculated. It won't do it if I answered a yes/no question by male and female or something like that. SPL sets the page length, so that just says how wide the page will be and how much it's going to fit on one text table. That won't apply to a spreadsheet. When you get tables out in a spreadsheet, they just carry on across as many columns as they need. They don't wrap onto a second page. UCH says it's going to underline the column headings. Again, that's a logical format that I'm turning on. If I put an N on the front, that would mean don't underline column headings. So if it's a logical option that's true or false, to turn it off, you put an N on the front, meaning not. And as we mentioned already, this means that CAS means CAZ, means I want the character for absolute 0 not to be a dash, which is the default in the software. I'm going to set it to the character 0. Now those formats are going to apply until we reset them. We can reset them back and forth as many times as we want to, and we can set them between different table or groups of tables so that we get different settings applied automatically, but they're basically set until further notice. Here's some information in this script here just explaining that, but let's get on to the code now. So the first table is table 1, which is by Q1 down the left hand side with Q2 across the top. Table 2 is going to pick up Q3 down the left hand side with Q1 across the top. Now Q3, you may remember, was where I grouped the number of children into 0, 1 to 2, 3, greater than 3. And now you can see I've got a table with a plus on the front. Now that plus means I want to put it on the bottom of the previous table. So in other words, this table here is going to get tacked on the bottom of that table that I'm highlighting now. Now I've got to give it a different name. I can't call it 2 as well, or I don't want to call it 3 because it'll mean that I'm jumping a table number when I get to the next table. So I've called it 2x. I could have called it 2a, 2zz, anything you like. And what we're going to put on the bottom of that previous table is IQ3. Now IQ3 was the actual number of children, if you recall, that we picked up from the data. And that @ sign that's preceding IQ3 there means that I want a mean score only table. So what this is going to do is give me a table that's got those ranges from Q3 that I specified of 0, 1 to 2, 3 and greater than 3 children. Underneath it, it's going to show the mean score, and it will look like one table as far as anybody looking at the output is concerned. And because I've set SDV at the top there, it's going to also give me a standard deviation, and it's going to analyse that all by question 1. So that's it all explained there. That's the end of our table stage. We've just got one more table here, table 3, and that's showing us how to use a simple filter. So here we've got if Q101. So if they gave response 1, or the first bit at question 1, which I think was the question that said yes, no, not stated. So if they gave the yes answer at question 1, we want table 3 to be Q3 down the side and Q2 across the top. Now you'll note here it's got a base title, and that base title is there because it will replace the global BT hash with the text, so it won't put all respondents on this table. It will put out the text all who have used MRDCL before. And that has to come there because then it will tell MRDCL it's referring to the table immediately above it. And then we're going to repeat that filter for the mean score because we want a mean score and standard deviation on the bottom, analysed by question 2 with that same filter, of course. Let's run that now and look at our tables, and sure enough, here we are. We've got table 1, question 1 in table 1 by question 2 across the top. We have noughts coming out for the zeros, but for the percentage, which is a different format option, we've got a dash. I think that looks quite good, shows out the difference. We go to table 2, and table 2, you remember, is made up of table 2, which was using the ranges we specified in the variable Q3, and then, if you remember, tacking on the bottom the mean score, and of course it produced additionally the standard deviation because we set that format option. And finally we get to table 3, which is not based on all 3 people, it's only based on 2 people because we only picked the people who said yes at question 1 for that. And so we get 2 people in our table with again the mean score on the bottom. So that takes you through a few more fundamentals in MRDCL. We've looked at picking up numeric fields, how to control how you read numeric fields, setting some of the special labels, format options, and applying a filter. And that completes this video in this series of 6 Get Started videos. Thank you.